Welcome back to Morning Trade Live. It's time for the Market Meetup panel, the latest in the social media saga and what exactly happens on these platforms, the tech giants that have been such a big part of the S&P 500 and equity market rally now in a little bit of a transition period perhaps. Facebook dropped 20% after earnings, and now the leads of these companies are coming to the forefront of the social conversation to clean up their act, or rather clean up the act that happens on their site. All right, guys, let's get this conversation started. Scott Connor joining us, Director of Education and host of Virtual Trade. Stephanie Lewicki, Senior Manager of Futures and Forex and a contributor here on the network. And Mr. Scott Bauer, back right in the middle, the CEO of Prosper Trading Academy. So Scott, guest goes first here. And as you know, we're not dabbling in the political speculation. We're just going to say whether it's a ban or whether it's whatever. The latest piece of this story is Jack Dorsey, after kind of holding out with his peers to go after the political commentator Alex Jones, now put a 7-day ban on his Twitter page after Facebook did something similar, YouTube did something similar, and Dorsey now said, you know what, this latest thing he did, I'm not okay with it. What do you make of these social media sort of transition that's happening right now?
This is probably just the tip of the iceberg. We did see something with Facebook, but I think this is going to become more and more relevant. And, just looking at how the street, how the public, how retail is reacting to the stock, it seems like they actually agree with it. Again, keeping all politics aside, whether you agree or disagree with the ban, with the 7-day ban, the street from a market perspective seems to just kind of shrug it off and probably thinks it's the right thing to do. But again, I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. It's going to start happening more.
What is the iceberg?
Well, the iceberg may be that you get some extreme left side, right side, conservative, whatever it is, opinions out there that just cause some major upheaval to the point, Oliver, that maybe there's even some sort of protest.
So basically like a political entity or some
I think it is.
movement then that goes after these companies because they don't like how they're treating whatever they label as the voice of their group or community or whatever.
Absolutely. I mean, it started quite a while ago with the president and his use of Twitter, but you can see it building and you can see things maybe happening in the future where, like you just said, it becomes a platform for, let's call it politics in general.
Yeah. Stephanie, for me, this kind of started, I don't know, maybe 8 months ago or so, when you heard headlines about how Apple was going to try and make applications that kind of wean people off and kids off the screen time a little bit. You saw former CEOs and founders of places like Facebook who are still involved in the investing community saying, look, I only let my kids use X amount of hours on tech. And I thought that was interesting because it was a sign that the people who created this thing now were saying, it's not all good.
Yeah, that you brought up Apple is really interesting because when that came out with their, 2 releases ago with the software, or the iPhone 9, 10, whichever one they're on, they had said you're going to be able to see how much screen time you're actually spending. And I thought, well, that would be a disadvantage because I think most people are going to be probably upset with the amount of screen time. Right. Wow, I need to cut back on it.
Look in a mirror, pal.
It was, socially, from my take, responsible of Apple to doing that. But I agree with the stuff and with what Scott said, that this could be the tip of the iceberg because I know we're staying away from politics, but again, you're going to argue that the freedom of speech, and this is just kind of, it might escalate because people are going to be upset that you banned someone but didn't ban somebody else. So I think it's a very delicate for these social media companies. It's going to be a delicate path for them to maneuver around. And I think if you just look at Twitter, the stock today is up 1.5%. So I think what we said, the investors, the trading community seems to like this decision right now, but they might not like the next one.
Yeah, I think this is all a very good points being made. Scott, is it a coincidence that this is all happening sort of post-Cambridge Analytica? Because there weren't a lot of, it started kind of percolating when you heard some of these leaders talk, like we just said and Stephanie mentioned, but then Mark Zuckerberg, who had at other times said, look, there were emails leaked where he spoke to his company and the individuals working at his company about how they want to maintain neutrality in terms of, the political dialogue that was happening around the election. And then Cambridge Analytica hit. The stock started to fall apart. It went under serious pressure as he testified before Congress. That was when it then bottomed out. But now all the leaders are basically saying, we want to be very vigilant about what goes on our platforms. And then when they do that, they have to make decisions, to Stephanie's point.
Absolutely. And I think this is the ongoing dilemma that social media is facing in general. I'm sure Dorsey feels, and Zuckerberg, we created a monster almost here because we weren't prepared to deal with the social ramifications of what our platform does. And Dorsey said, quote, we cannot build a service subject to personal beliefs.
Yeah.
That was the quote, right? So that just shows you right there that they are still struggling, like other social media companies, to say, what is that iceberg of free speech versus content control? And that is an ongoing issue, especially our day and age, because we've always had free speech, obviously, but we have a judicial system that said, well, yeah, free speech only goes so far.
There's slander.
There's no slander. There's no libel.
Right.
We have laws in place, but now this day and age is more of a social justice type of approach to, beyond just the judicial system, what socially is proper on these different networks and media. So again, that is an ongoing situation. I think what Dorsey really wants to focus on, at least from my impression, is that whatever that policy is, that they implement it consistently across all cases. And that's, again, going to be a challenge.
Is that what it's about, Scott? Just consistency so people know what goes on the platform? Because all this will eventually be meaningful. We're talking about this from the investment perspective because so far this has had pretty big ramifications. Twitter dropped off right when Facebook dropped off this past quarter, and Facebook talked about things like GDPR and privacy having an impact a little bit, and not delete Facebook, but just the idea that they now may not be having as much drive from advertising if they're reorienting the newsfeed to avoid stuff that hurt in the past.
You know what, and it's a work in progress. What we see today and the decisions being made today by Dorsey and what Zuckerberg did, just a while ago, that probably changes 6 months, 12 months down the road as new issues come up. So, I think there has to be this balance that the leaders have to have between acquiescing to the social aspect of it, acquiescing to what the mainstream people want to see, but also preserving the integrity of the stock price, bottom line.
Yeah, and that comes to another point basically, which is the stock price is a reflection of potentially the cash flow that's coming down the line, Stephanie, the money that they can make. If that money is about eyeballs, then does it really matter whether or not you agree with them unless we start to see meaningful drop-offs in user count? I mean, that's kind of why Facebook dropped, right? Because there were concerns about the monthly active users.
Right, exactly. The monthly active users, that's what you saw, Netflix, something different, but that model of subscription and users. So if people start dropping off of Twitter because of this, of course you're going to see an effect on the price of the stock. And just to tie these in together as we see what Twitter is being used for, the stuff with what Elon Musk, how he came out, and you can tie this in together, and now the SEC is after him. So that's a whole nother realm of Twitter's got another, that was Elon Musk who did that, but are they going to have to implement policies on that? Like that's
CEOs and
yes, correct.
There's just boxes that keep on getting opened, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Scott, however, if there's not a clear competitor, for example, right now, Delete Facebook didn't take off for whatever reason. Maybe it's just too embedded in people's lifestyles. You log into other apps using it, or I text my grandma through it, and it's an easy communication method.
Right.
But for something like Twitter or Snapchat, Snapchat, we see there's an alternative for Instagram, and we see the users drop off. But for something like Twitter or Facebook, Twitter especially, does it all matter unless there's somewhere else to go? If there's another competing sort of entity, which maybe is a little bit harder to say for Twitter?
Right. Well, Facebook, Twitter, they have an early footprint. They got in early, and they've taken advantage of that through membership and users, like Stephanie was pointing out. But those users can be fickle. They're not married to those companies, and they do have a choice to go other places. And of course, there are other competitors out there. But their concern is, we don't want to get too divisive with the way that we control content, because we could alienate half the nation. And again, are we going to lose users because of that? So it's very difficult. And we're talking about sort of free speech issues, but what about all the other things that are going on? One of his big concerns, Dorsey, was the weaponization, he called that, of his website.
Right.
In other words, political interference, election interference.
And that's why he did
bots.
the 7-day ban on Jones. He
Yeah,
said
it's not more than just
the
free speech.
content was inciting violence.
Yeah.
All right, we got to leave it there. We're going to have another conversation here about a big growth area. We're going to have a little bit more fun. We're talking TV, we're talking 5G. We'll be right back to discuss Verizon's latest sales pitch. It's pretty interesting. Back in just a moment with the Meetup panel. All right, we're going to take a break from our philosophical conversation for a moment. And we're moving it over to tech because 5G and Verizon and the future for content continues to stream along at an extremely fast pace. I want to bring back in our panelists. Stephanie Lewicki is with us, Scott Bauer, as well as Scott Connor. All right, Mr. Bauer, you start us off again here. Verizon is going to try and coax us into the new 5G area with a little free TV. What do you think?
You know, the free stuff that has been offered in the past from their competitors, from AT&T, from T-Mobile, from Sprint, it actually draws users in.
Right.
Now, how relevant is the free TV going to be? You know what? To me, where I live on my phone, as many of us do, and we need to have instant access, whether that's good, bad, or indifferent, and for me most of the time it's bad. We need to have instant access. The draw of 5G is compelling enough. I don't necessarily care about the free TV, but for mainstream, the mainstream user, that free TV may be enough of an offer to get them to switch over to the 5G. If 5G is as good as it is billed to be, and that's yet to be seen, then that is a major upgrade from where we are right now.
Verizon, obviously Fios has been competing for some time on the cable and the TV front. Now they want to basically take the helm as everyone tries to break into 5G. Scott, is this the beginning? Is this also the tip of the iceberg where now everyone else is going to start offering different ways to get you into their system from the ground up?
I mean, you might see that, but like Scott mentioned, AT&T has already had sort of a free TV, what they call Watch TV on the 4G. I think what's interesting and why this is important for Verizon is, as you know, they haven't been very active in the merger acquisition space as many of the other competitors have been. So it's kind of like they're putting a lot of chips on this particular table in terms of 5G. You're absolutely right. 5G as a sort of a service or a technology, it does remain to be seen. It does have a much higher, a wavelength, so that tends to bounce around a lot more, and you need actually a lot more. Routers type hardware in a home to run it, or in a business as well. But yeah, absolutely, this could be a very big for Verizon.
Is this the beginning, Stephanie, of just another era of super complicated, service provider deals and stuff? I don't even know what's going on in my monthly Verizon bill. I feel like 5G is going to make it even more complicated.
It probably will, and I think this 5G is going to be in the home first, and that's why it's not going to be ready for mobile or your tablets until 2020. This getting the 5G in your home will be a little bit quicker, so they're trying to get in, and teaming up with Apple and Google is a great idea. I mean, those are great companies, so I think that's a good partnership that they're doing. Does it complicate things? Probably, and is the phone call when you call up and say, hi, can I change your service? You'll get it 10 times faster. You might click, no, hang up, I got to do this.
Dream on, Stephanie.
Right, so I think the partnership is good, and I'm kind of in a wait and see mode until it actually comes out.
Yeah. Scott, what's so interesting about 5G is basically just the entire suite of applications that can happen on it, right? Whether it's your, watching Ultra HD TV, whether it is the phone, doing it from your home or wherever, it's your thermostat, it's your car eventually. All this basically means you've got a whole other ecosystem of companies and industries for folks like yourself to trade.
And that's a great thing for people like us. That is a great thing. I think the biggest concern to me is not the bundling issue. There's always going to be a special offer to get into it. The biggest concern to me is by the time this is actually rolled out, which I think it's not supposed to be till 2020 really, is the next wave already going to be in place? The 6G, 7G, whatever it may be, is that already going to be in the works where maybe a year or two after that, it makes 5G almost the obsolete piece of equipment out there, or piece of technology out there. So that's the concern to me, is that Verizon can get this to market quick enough that it has a lifespan and draw customers in that will then eventually remain as the next technology comes out.
And Oliver, we talked about on the show, I think maybe last week or a week before, about that joint venture between Meg Whitman and Jeff Katzenberg, who are coming out.
New TV,
Yeah, the new TV, right? Was the initial name?
New TV.
And they secured $1 billion in funding and have partners such as Disney, Fox, NBC, Goldman, Alibaba, like they are getting ready, and they said this could run on 5G. So you see this preceding that, like that means something, that you have these really big players in Hollywood starting to produce or looking to produce and raising that much money so that they're ready when 5G is ready.
I think one thing for sure, or maybe two things, is that I think Verizon announced that they officially want to be a competitor in broadband internet. Okay, so that's one. And number two, they have high hopes for 5G. In terms of infrastructure, obviously they're looking at that as being a much more effective way of bringing internet to the home, obviously, instead of having to bury cables in the traditional cable companies. So again, they're making a commitment to this going forward.
The new era is around the corner, Scott. We've already seen it show up in a lot of the companies that are providing those optical cables. This came into sharp focus around the ZTE issue, right? Because the Chinese company was a receiver, or rather a customer of so many U.S. optical 5G related stocks. As a trader investor, the last point here, leave us on this. Are we at the point where you can buy a Verizon based on a 5G thesis? Can you buy a Sprint T-Mobile on a 5G thesis?
Absolutely not, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think you trade them on the current fundamentals, you trade them on maybe forward guidance going out 6 to 9 months, but to take that leap of faith and say, I'm in right now because I've got a 3-year time horizon, let's say, because 5G is the next end-all be-all, I think there's other opportunities out there.
Yeah, all right, maybe more of a decades-long game if you got the patience. All right, Scott Bauer is up next on Fast Market with the Traders. Thanks to Scott Connor and Stephanie Lewicki as well. Catch Mr. Bauer with Mr. Hanks and White in just a moment. Then after that, we've got a whole suite of programming. As usual, Professor Connor with Virtual Trade at 11. Real Talk with JJ, and then Virtual Trade again before we get to Midday Movers with Mr. Ben Lichtenstein. I'll see you here, Market on Close, at 2 p.m. Don't forget, we got NVIDIA earnings, we got AMAT numbers. It's going to be a fun one. Thanks for joining.